So the new computer is ordered, and it might have to wait for that for another Lord Killian video. It is written. Probably going to have to be 2, maybe 3 parts. We'll see how the recording goes. But for now, if I can keep my computer going long enough, I'm going to give you this one. This is one from the New York Times v. OpenAI. And if you recall, this is the big one that basically destroyed all of the privacy you have. Because what can we do when we don't want companies to look at stuff we do online? We request for it to be deleted. And it's nice when they actually do that. Well, ChatGPT does that. OpenAI does that. You've got temporary chats, which automatically get deleted. And then you can delete a conversation anytime you want. Now, they do retain it for 30 days, just in case you need to get it back or just in case there's some kind of legal thing that comes up or whatever. But you see, these news reporters, the kind of people who want to grab leaks from everywhere and the kind of people who want to invade everyone's privacy, their financial privacy, their intimate privacy, stuff they can make into a story with a nice clickbait title. And you can go from being a nobody to being this reviled monster in the eyes of the press. They did it to Nicholas Salmon. They can do it to us too. And the more of our private data they have, the more they can do that. So as scary as it is that the police could get it, at least theoretically the police should have a warrant. And that's why we didn't like Edward Snowden pointing out that they were getting all this stuff without a warrant. Well, almost as scary in many ways is the news getting hold of it. Because most other corporations, what do they want? They want to use it for advertising so they can sell you things you might actually want to buy. But not the news companies. They want it all. And this is also part of this larger trend, as I pointed out, of people being dragged into court. It's like, oh, you deleted this stuff. Why were you deleting it? What do you have to hide? And that's exactly what they're doing here. They were deleting the temporary chats and the deleted chats. And then they went whining to Judge Ona T. Wong. Your Honor, they're destroying evidence. What are they hiding? We need to see everything they have to hide. There's actually another similar one going on in, is it Tremblay v. OpenAI? Or it might be Authors Guild. One of those other cases against OpenAI. They're using the fact that after the training, they deleted the Books 1 and Books 2 datasets. Why did they delete that, Your Honor? What were they trying to hide? If you recall, though, over in Bart's v. Anthropic, the problem is that they didn't delete them. Oh, they kept a hold of LibGen and Pulimi. That means they were making some kind of library or something, whatever. I don't know. So if you retain it, you're in trouble. If you delete it, you're in trouble. That's how these people operate. So yeah, here we are in the viciously corrupt Southern District of New York, where the judge is actually entertaining this. So what we have here is a joint letter from both parties summarizing their arguments about this, and you're going to see how much merit there is to this, which is not a lot. But before we get there, we start with OpenAI's position, which says the hit counts OpenAI provided confirm what OpenAI has said all along. In the real world, people do not use ChatGPT in the way that news plaintiffs claim they do. Yeah, they don't go to ChatGPT saying, I want to read this news story. That's just not what they do. The frequency with which users ask ChatGPT about topics that are relevant to news plaintiffs' claims is vanishingly low. User mentions of Wirecutter, I don't know what that's supposed to mean, are roughly 1 in a million. New York Daily News is even less frequent. So too for the 89 so-called pink slime websites. I don't know what pink slime is supposed to be. Less than redacted % of prompts include references to the New York Times, which, in all likelihood, would include references that have nothing to do with these claims, e.g. a question about the Times' stock price or history. So what they're saying is that any search including New York Times must be trying to get to our copyrighted data. And same with pink slime or whatever. News plaintiffs attempt to skew these numbers by lumping together 50 terms and reporting aggregated hit counts. And the terms they lump together include generic terms like Twin Cities, Intercept, Tribune, Daily News, and Sir, which could be about so many different things, but they've got 50 of these terms. They just run it through and say, hey, is there any one of these terms? Oh, look at all of these aggregate results. Here's the number. Here's the %. Oh my God, it must be infringing. which no doubt result in thousands of false positives and account for roughly 2/3 of the aggregated hit counts they report. That is precisely why the protocol precludes the use of these hit counts for merits purposes. The way to draw conclusions about the content of ChatGPT conversations is by sampling the more than 40 billion conversations that OpenAI has retained and made available for merits analysis. And remember, those are conversations made by you and me. That's not OpenAI stuff, that's our stuff. Imagine if, someone were suing Microsoft for Microsoft Word and they wanted to see everyone's Word documents. That's exactly what this is. Microsoft, go through OneDrive and let us see what everyone's doing. No difference. More to the point, news plaintiffs fail to address the singular purpose of this exercise: to determine whether OpenAI's policy of honoring users' privacy decisions has resulted in a bias in what will be sampled for merits analysis. News plaintiffs previously claimed that a bias exists because the data available for merit sampling does not contain conversations generated via ChatGPT's temporary chat feature, and conversations that users manually delete via the ChatGPT interface, which OpenAI retains for only 30 days. But the hit counts prove that the exclusion of temporary and deleted chats will have no discernible effect. And so that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to compare it. Statistics is all about making a comparison. What are you comparing? So here we've got all of our normal chats that we have, and how much does all of this show up in there versus how much it shows up in the totality once you include the temporary chats and the deleted chats. That's how you properly do statistics. If you don't have a comparison, you're not doing statistics. But the hit counts prove that the exclusion of temporary and deleted chats will have no discernible effect. That eliminates any claim that news plaintiffs have suffered prejudice, along with the justification for the preservation order, which was due to concern about sampling bias. The court should vacate the preservation order in its entirety. So the question before the court is whether a statistically significant difference exists between the data available for sampling, which excludes temporary and deleted chats, and the data that would have been available for sampling had OpenAI retained temporary and deleted chats indefinitely. So when you add all those on and you do a search in that bigger data set, is it statistically any different? If news plaintiffs are correct that honoring users' privacy choices will cause prejudicial sampling bias, then that bias would have shown up in the form of higher hit counts for the relevant terms in the all-in sample, which includes temporary and deleted chats, than in the retained sample, which does not. The hit counts show the opposite. It's not what they claim it is. And we're not allowed to see the actual numbers. They appear in blank prompts and blank outputs and these others, but they do tell us these are not statistically significant differences. In fact, OpenAI's expert analyzed each of the hit counts in the retained sample and the all-in sample and found that out of the 288 data points, only 6 are statistically significant. 3 of those are statistically significant in the opposite direction, meaning that the terms that plaintiffs chose are actually more frequent in the retained sample. They have less frequency once you include all the deleted stuff. And the remaining 3, which relate solely to differences on hits and outputs, not prompts, do not indicate a material sampling bias upon further analysis. News plaintiffs do not even attempt to engage in a proper statistical analysis, and we'll see that when we get there. Instead, they focus on a separate sample that they insisted on including in the protocol over OpenAI's objection, composed entirely of temporary chats. But as news plaintiffs well know, temporary chats comprise less than, redacted, of all ChatGPT conversations. So only a tiny amount of them are temporary chats. And this is a common statistical fallacy that we'll see them engaging in it. It's kind of when you look at different statistics for different groups and you assume they're all the same size, but if one's a lot bigger than the other, that could skew things. I was looking at some statistics for the podcast, and I posted it as a separate video, where they were looking at how many people are killed by Tylenol in Australia. And I found a table with all sorts of causes of death, and like you're just as likely to die falling off a chair, you're more likely to be killed by your own bed, things like that. I saw something interesting though, and I had to post it on X. You are more likely to die falling out of bed than you are falling off a ladder. Sounds weird. But if you think about it, it actually makes sense. Everyone gets out of bed every morning. You're doing that every day, maybe twice a day if you take a nap or something. Or if you include all the times you get up to go to the bathroom. How many times you get on the ladder? Most of us get on a ladder on very rare occasions. So even though a ladder might be more dangerous when you're on it, overall throughout your life, you're less likely to fall off a ladder because you're not on a ladder that often. And so you see how different sizes of different groups can do this. You can also look for Simpson's paradox. I've got a quickie on this. When they were looking at admissions in Berkeley, and they were saying like, oh, more men are admitted than women. What sort of sexism is this? Let's find out which department is responsible. They looked at the departments, and all of the departments, every single one of them, were more likely to admit women than men. But because they were different sizes, then the types of departments that women generally went for were a different size than, say, STEM fields. And that made all the difference. Check out that video. I've even got a demonstration of it using a deck of cards. That's the sort of thing you need to understand when you're doing statistics. So news plaintiffs' aggregated hit counts do not help them either. Even setting aside the fact that their table is highly misleading, these hit counts do not even purport to show prejudicial sampling bias. To the contrary, news plaintiffs' table suggests that their publication names are more frequent in the data available for sampling than in temporary and deleted chats. And here's the disturbing part. News plaintiffs do not explain what they hope to do with the logs they want preserved that they cannot do with a representative sample. Why do they want it so bad? What do they want to do with our data that's so private we want it deleted? In any case, this court emphasized at the May hearing that the preserved data will not be provided to anybody, and even the court will not be looking at it. That's good, at least. The court should deny that request and vacate the preservation order in its entirety. So that's OpenAI's position. Let's look at the news plaintiff's position, in which the news plaintiffs prove they suck at statistics. Yes, this is the New York Times and a whole bunch of others. The parties in the court are here because OpenAI chose to destroy over 8 billion ChatGPT. Oh my God, it's over 9,000! Over 9,000! Over 8 billion ChatGPT output logs after the Times filed suit in December 2023. That order was premised in part on the court's hypothesis that users who were using ChatGPT to evade publishers' paywalls were also more likely to ask OpenAI to delete their chats. And the evidence they have for that? Absolutely none whatsoever. So news plaintiffs therefore respectfully submit that OpenAI should continue to preserve output log data that hits on the news-related classifiers and keywords used for this exercise, at least until the conclusion of the litigation. So then they go through the numbers: 57.3%, 46.5%, 18.9%, all these numbers. Numbers that are meaningless without a basis for comparison. Oh, this amount more frequently, that amount more frequently. Okay, suppose something appears once in the data, and then it appears one more time in the deleted chats. Oh my God, it appears twice as often! Yeah, but who cares? It's basically a rounding error. This is like those people who say, oh my God, 5G and Wi-Fi are so terrible for you because look, this group of people is 300% more likely to get this or that. And you actually look at it and it's 300% larger than this really small number, all of which is way below the margin for error. These numbers are meaningless unless you know the relative size of the group of temporary and deleted chats versus all of the others. What portion is that? Try plugging these numbers into Bayes' rule. Just pull up a Bayesian calculator. It says, okay, put in this, and you're like, I don't have enough data for that. What do I put here? What do I put there? Because you don't have enough. The hit reports also include an astonishing number of hits. Notice they don't give the number. It's an astonishing number. Remember when we talked about pounding the table? If the law is against you, pound the facts. If the facts are against you, pound the law. If the law and the facts are against you, pound the table. OpenAI wasn't doing this. We just read it. They weren't using this kind of language. It's an astonishing number of hits on news plaintiffs' names in both. Astonishing is subjective. What does it mean? It means nothing. In both the prompts and the outputs across the different populations of ChatGPT conversations. And they show us all of the redacted numbers, which wouldn't do us any good even if they didn't redact them, because, again, we have no proper basis for comparison. And they say, but for the preservation order, OpenAI would have deleted the approximately redacted % of user prompts to ChatGPT using news plaintiffs' names. So what? These numbers extrapolate out to approximately redacted user prompts on a daily basis. Again, so what? You're just throwing out a number with no basis for comparison. And even they say right here, 330 million daily US-based chats. Even a tiny portion of that is going to end up being this big number. Oh my God, it's over 9,000. That's why it's a fallacy, people. What are you comparing it to? That's what they're not doing. And then they go on about how user behavior has changed over time in view of OpenAI's blocks on news plaintiffs' content. For example, many users likely gave up searching for news plaintiffs' content by name after repeatedly encountering OpenAI's blocks that, according to OpenAI, prevent news plaintiffs' content from appearing in output. Do any of you believe that for a second? The evidence they have for this is none, but think about what you would do. Would you stop asking ChatGPT about it? I mean, you'd still get, whatever response you could. The general news terms and the news-related classifiers are more probative in ascertaining whether there are differences between the populations of data with respect to paywall-avoiding activities and the prevalence of hits on news plaintiffs' names and potentially infringement. Hey, any hit on their name is an infringement. You type in New York Times, oh, that's an infringement. From this exercise are almost certainly underrepresented. Don't you know? You should know if they're underrepresented, if you have the proper numbers to compare them to. OpenAI seems to have those numbers, and they gave them, they redacted them, but they gave them. So how much do you suck? The bottom line is, they could get everything they say they want without this private data. There is nothing stopping them from doing the analysis on the rest of it and showing that's what ChatGPT does. And what difference does it make if it's, some percentage off or whatever? The fact of the matter is it's either happening or it's not. If it's happening, you win. If it's not, you lose. And they have copious amounts of data to look through. So what's the point of this? They must want this data for some other reason. And what is that reason? They're news reporters. You work it out. Thank you so very much for watching. Comments for the comment god, shares for the share throne. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell. And of course, donate Doppagosity.tv. Keeps me doing what I do, especially since I just sunk $800 on a new computer. It would have been a lot more, but most of my components are going to be able to move over to it. So that's fine. I was able to get off with it's basically a new box, new motherboard, new processor, and new power supply. It'll be the computer of Theseus. So if you want to help me out with that, you can give in any amount with a one-time donation or become a regular supporter at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, stay strong and be free.